All right, so welcome, week 2. Here we are. So I have a few announcements, just stuff that's coming up that's available to you, just in case it's interesting to you or helpful. So I'm going to share that first. And then I'd love to do a little debrief on our homework, how the personal budgets went, and answer any questions. And yeah, just give us some time to process that. Um, and then we'll go over, so there are 4 reports, like financial reports, that I'm going to define today for you. 2 of those 4 are only going to be useful really if you need to apply for funding in any capacity. So like if you wanted to apply for a grant, or if you wanted to apply for a small business loan, like that kind of stuff, they'll absolutely ask you for these 2 documents. And so I just like to cover them. We won't spend a ton of time with them, but I just like to cover them. So if you ever do get into that position, you're not like, I have no idea what that word means. And you can at least show up and feel like relatively confident and you understand what they're asking of you. And then the other 2 reports, everyone I think should have, no matter how small or big your business is. The other 2 reports we'll cover, I think, are really important and I want you to have. And then, like I said, we'll spend some time actually building your business budget today. So I think in an ideal scenario, you would walk away from today's session with all your income streams put into the spreadsheet I'm going to give you. And then your homework will be to compile your expenses for your business. But I just want to give you a little time live to work on that, because I've noticed there tend to be quite a few questions around organizing the budget. And I just want to like be here so we can process that. And you don't have to feel like you have to sit and wait until next week to like get those answers. And then we'll go over our homework and then that'll be it for today. Any questions on the agenda? Anything you're like, I was really hoping we were going to cover X and it's not listed? No? Good. Okay. Got a few more folks coming in here. You just welcome our new humans. Hi, Carrie. Hi, Wendy. Welcome, welcome. Okay. All right. So I am going to rapid fire some announcements into the chat. Oh, perfect. Wait. Are you guys, when you open the chat, is it our chat from last time? It's a fresh chat? Mine is like full of
I think
all of
because
our conversation last week.
you're the host,
I've
Zoom now
never seen
saved
that
everything.
before, though. That's wild. I've never seen that before. Okay, cool. Okay, so a couple quick announcements. So a few things. I know not all of you are in Vermont, but for folks that are in Vermont, this first announcement, VSAC is called, if you have not heard of VSAC, they're the Vermont Student Aid Corporation, and they currently still have funds. And so I'm going to put this link here in the chat. If it's going to let me. There we go. You could get a grant for free business coaching for 4 months. This is with me. So if you are a Vermont resident and you would like some help this winter, this fall, winter, they still have money going towards this. It is income dependent, so not everyone will qualify. But I just like to keep reminding folks that this exists and it's a really, really great resource. And you do not have to pay this money back. And if you qualify for it, like it's so incredibly helpful. So just know that is there. The application is very simple. It is really, there's no like essay. You don't have to like explain why you deserve this money. It's really just like, how much money do you make? How many assets do you have? Yes or no, you qualify. That's it. And you hear back really quickly. You'll hear back within like about a week. And so they do run out of funds. They ran out of funds last year. And so we had to wait a while. So when the money is there, I'm like, go, 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 get it as much as you can. So that's the first thing. Second thing is I have 2 free They're free sliding scale workshops coming up. And I really do encourage you to use the free option if that is helpful to you. The first one I just put in there, this one is around copywriting. So we'll be looking at copywriting through an anti-capitalist, anti-oppressive lens. So if you need to write a sales page or do your website, or you have a workshop you want to host and you're just kind of like, I think I'm doing a good job and I really want this to like be true to who I am and my values, but having an extra set of eyes on my copy and what I'm writing would be really helpful. This will be, I'll have 3 folks actually submit copy ahead of time for this workshop. And so feel free to register for that if that feels useful for you right now. If you have any questions, I'm going to keep rapid firing these, but if you have questions, just interrupt me. The second workshop is, this one is all about holiday marketing emails. So if you tend to have higher sales during the holidays, during like November, December, January, if that's like one of your times to shine, and we will look at this on our cash flow projections, we'll figure out when are your times to shine sales wise. But if the winter tends to be like a lucrative time for you, I can't encourage you enough to have some strategy behind what you're actually writing about, whether, and like this will be specifically for email marketing, but you could easily use this strategy for Instagram or LinkedIn or YouTube or whatever you want to do. So we'll really create like a map of like over the course of November, December, January, what the hell are you talking about, and like how frequently are you talking about it, and how does it really lead to whatever it is you sell. So that's there. I run free. Oh, good. I'm glad, Joanne. I run free office hours the first Thursday of every month. And sometimes they have a theme. This is November's here in the chat. This November, the office hours is really going to be dedicated to sales specific. So I've heard from quite a few folks that sales have been really hard this fall. Just like quick show of hands. Has anyone else felt like sales were harder this fall than they have been in the past, or getting money in general has been harder? If you're like, I'm too new to know, that's totally okay. This happens every single time we have an election year. People are like, oh my God, and they like freak out about how they purchase things, and like it just gets a little wild. And so I'm going to share in this office hours some strategies I've been working on this fall, and some shifts some trends I've noticed in terms of how people are purchasing. Obviously my experience is more relevant to like a service provider, so I don't sell like a physical product. But I think there's a lot of similarities and overlap. So that office hours will be free, and we'll just be mostly focused on like talking about sales and what is working for folks and what's not working, and can we troubleshoot some of these ideas. Okay, second to last, my pride and joy this year. I'm so excited for this. This is the Labor of Love Challenge. So this will start next Thursday, so 1 week from today. This is a free 6-week challenge to do something that has absolutely nothing to do with making money or work. And so the idea here is to like pick a hobby. Could be something you used to labor on previously, but you've dropped because you're too busy and capitalism. But it could be an opportunity to pick up a new hobby if you're like, I've always wanted to become a spoon whittler. You know, this could be your chance to whittle spoons this fall. And so this will be 6 weeks. There's no calls, and we have like an online course platform that we'll use to communicate. So there'll be like a reflection that comes out each week in a video format, and an opportunity to just like comment and engage with other folks that are in the group. We're up to about 40 people in there. It's pretty awesome. There's some really great energy, and people are very excited to like create fun things this fall. So that will be fun. And then last but not least, Wendy brought this to my attention And I just wanted to make sure, I did not know about this, and so I just wanted to make sure other people knew about this. They're unfortunately out of funds for this year, but they will have funds back this spring. And this is specifically for nonprofits. So this is a nonprofit capacity building grant. And so it's a $5,000 grant. I think they did a really good job with their sales page. It's like very clear what you can use this grant for and what you can't. But this is Vermont specific again. But I just want you to know, if you are a nonprofit or you know people that run a nonprofit that could use help in business, you can use this grant to work with me. And it will be available in the spring. So just to kind of keep that on your radar. Always trying to find ways to get free money is really the name of my team. Any question about any of those announcements? Good. Okay, cool. If you have any questions about them, just let me know. All right, so today we will be week 2, like I mentioned, we'll be talking about understanding our finances. So we're going to dive into a couple of these financial documents. So we're going to cover profit and loss statements. We'll do a balance sheet, and then we'll just briefly touch on what a cash flow projection is, but we're really going to spend all of next session talking about that. And then what we'll spend most of our time today doing is building a budget. But first, I'd love to check in. Wendy, I got your questions. Thank you so much for sending those. I unfortunately do not have the answers to your questions, but I think my partner will. He just unfortunately was in a meeting at 8:30 this morning, so I didn't get it to run them by him because he is actually the one that has input all of our data. But I did want to give a chance for us to just talk about how the budget went. Were you able to start to put a budget together? Did anyone feel like, nope, I froze and I went and crawled in a hole since last time? That's totally okay too. We love you. But yeah, I'd like to open the floor and just kind of reflect on how that went.
I'll just reflag the comment I made to you, but if you are a
Yeah.
self-employed business owner, I was very surprised that health insurance and childcare didn't come up as itemized budgets, because those are major costs and you're
Yeah.
not. So just question, make sure that those costs, if you pay for them separately outside of your paycheck.
And so I'm assuming you can just create new fields, right?
Yeah, you can, but I
Yeah.
like,
Okay. You were surprised it wasn't prompted. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I think
they
that's
had
good
like
feedback for
allowance
them.
for kids, but no childcare costs.
That's a good feedback for them. I'm sure they would be open to hearing like that those are things that it would make sense to have pre-populated. Yeah. You had also asked about, oh, like if you need to upload and parse to future bank statements. So as long as what we found was each month we had to do less and less.
Okay.
Because it is AI, so it's going to learn over time. But for instance, one of the things that's been most challenging is sometimes I get paid under the table via Venmo, and it just categorizes all Venmo. It can't read through the Venmo interactions. So it's just I have to then go pull up my Venmo and be like, no, this was me sending takeout to a friend. This was me paying for something. This was me getting paid. This was blah, 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 blah. But we did find that, for instance, recently we wanted to separate out how we had purchasing coffee, like a cup of coffee, like at Scout or whatever. Purchasing a cup of coffee was part of our takeout budget. And I wanted to pull that out. I wanted to see exactly how much are we spending on coffee every month, and then is it an unreasonable amount of money that we should be paying attention to. And so once we said no, Scout charges from Scout go to this category, not takeout, it knew that forever on. Is that what your question was around?
It was kind of just the mechanics of the next, and like it's got all my bank information and like
Yeah.
it had my credit card statements and stuff. And it was drawing down against savings when I assign things, but then I'm just curious what the population looks like next month as my
Yeah.
transactions go through and my statements go through,
Yep.
and how much I need to manually configure those charges or
Hmm.
import my
Hmm.
statements or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, I think we'll know soon when the next month rolls through and we'll be able to see. But I also think I'll forward your questions on to my partner because he's the one that does all this and he's like always very excited to answer questions. Um, so we can touch on that too. Lake, yeah, do you want to share a little bit about your experience? No pressure if you're like, I do not prefer to verbally process that. And what I put in the chat is there.
Sure. Yeah, it
Okay,
was just
cool.
putting all of my monthly expenses together.
Hmm.
I realized that it costs me like almost double than what I thought it did for me to survive every month.
Ah, that's a fun one.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so do you mind, and again, like at any point, feel free anyone to be like, nope, that's like as far as I want to go. But I would be curious if like are you going into debt as a result of that? Or like where has if it's costing twice as much to exist than you thought it was, where is that money coming from that's covering those expenses?
Depleting my savings.
It's depleting your savings. Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. 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 And had you noticed that, or was that also new information?
I mean, I noticed that I just didn't realize like at what
Yeah.
rate it was
At what
happening.
rate? Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. It's something that I found interesting. Like, so I for the first time, I actually like put all of my income in the worksheet we're going to be using today, and I am going to share my income with you, which feels wildly vulnerable, but we're going to do that. And I noticed I was like, I've always struggled with my income fluctuates so much month to month, like it is not consistent ever. There are trends, like as I look year over year, but like there's a lot of fluctuation. And I have always really struggled with knowing how much I could pay myself without like figuring out that rate of depletion, right? Like if there's X amount in the savings account, how long can I live off of that with Y amount continuing to come in, right? And like, especially if X is like, if our expenses are greater than our income, but not, but only by like maybe 10%, it's like, what is that like depreciation? Like, how fast can we live like that before there's nothing left? Does that make sense? Like, that's always been something that's been hard for me to like grapple with. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I could pay myself more, but now I'm like terrified because what if all of a sudden I wake up and there's just no more money left and I've paid myself too much, right? So we'll explore that a lot this month too, just figuring out like what's a safe amount to be paying ourselves. But yeah, I appreciate you sharing. Like, is anyone else in the same boat as Lake? Has anyone else discovered that they're spending more than they are making or more than they thought they were spending?
I mean, I knew I was spending. My husband and I have been in a lot of transition, and I just got a job that I started last week, and it's only
Hmm.
part-time, and he's not even working yet. So I
Hmm.
knew like it was interesting putting it in. Like part of me is like, I already knew this, but part of me was like to see it all calculated and like, yeah, it was like minus half of like we're spending double
Hmm.
what what I'm making at my part.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's kind of humorous, in a way, but a
Yeah.
part of me, like, do I even belong here? Like imposter syndrome because I'm not
Mm,
business isn't even making money, but I
that's
still am
okay. Yeah.
gaining a lot. And I actually read your newsletter right before we jumped on, and it made me cry because it's so nice to be able to show up where you're at and like you
Yeah.
word it so well. So I really
Ugh,
appreciate
I appreciate that, Rose. You're always welcome here. All of you are. And if we like don't make space for that, like how the fuck are we ever supposed to learn? Like, I wish I was you at the beginning of my business. I wish I had showed up for something like this when I didn't have clients yet, right? Like, instead, I was by myself, freaking the fuck out, thinking I was doing everything wrong, probably doing at least half of it wrong, and like, you know, making some huge mistakes. And like, I had to learn all that the hard way. And like, that sucks. And it shouldn't be that way. Like, I don't, it's part of why, you know, it's a huge motivator for me why I do all these workshops for free. It's like, you shouldn't have to go into debt to receive help in anything. Like, you shouldn't have to. Like, yes, at the end of the day, I need to cover my own expenses. Thankfully, I've figured out ways to do that, and we'll talk more about that too, of like how else can we get creative around these things. But like, these resources, like understanding your budget, should not be gate kept, right? Like, this should not be, there should not be a barrier here for you to understanding this. And there's no, it's, you're never too early to be looking at this stuff and thinking about it. So I appreciate you being here, and it's brave. Yeah. Okay, let's see some other things in the chat. No worries, Joanne. So Joanne, you said you've gone through your savings more quickly than you thought you would to get your business started. Yep. Lori said there were some big expenses like PG year tuition and auto expenses that you have just tanked your budget. Yeah. So same, Lori. This year we got hit with an $8,000 tax bill that I had no idea was coming, like no idea at all. And it just was like, I literally laid in bed and just cried for probably a week. Like, I was just like, this is devastating. Like, we don't have just $8,000 sitting around. That's like, sure, you can use me. You fucked up, but here you go. Like, you know, like, I'm like, I don't have that kind of money. I'm not independently wealthy. And so like, it was, and I think a little bit maybe on the line of like what Rose is expressing, like, I felt embarrassed. I felt stupid. I'm like, I've been doing this for 6 years and I still am not capturing my taxes appropriately. Like, this is so frustrating. And so it's like, and those big expenses are really frustrating because you can be seemingly doing everything right and it's going well. And then all of a sudden you get hit with something like that. And you're like, God damn it. Like, I'm back to square one again. Like, come on. Like, why does this have to be so hard? Why do we have to start over and over and over again? So I feel you on that. Wendy, you said your expenses are reasonably high. For some reason, this little thing is in the way. I can't read. Vermont is so expensive. Yes, it is. And it would be helpful if other people acknowledge that, like our policy leaders. And that will be a challenge as you move into startup phase again for your business, since you don't have a regular client base. But you took the time to look at your overall financial picture and was pleasantly surprised at how well you had saved and invested. Good for you. But that means a lot of your resources are locked up in retirement. Totally. Yep. And we can talk. I don't have any content on like retirement and saving. We'll talk a little bit about saving as we start to build the budget out. But that's definitely something that, like, just show of hands, who has a retirement account? Caroline's like, that's hilarious. I love it. Yeah. Okay. I was fortunate in that I had a manager. I used to work at Uno's Pizzeria back in my early 20s. And I had a manager who made me set up a 401k. And that like was how I started that. But while our children have been in daycare, we have not been able to contribute to our retirement. And so like, you know, it's something we'll hopefully come back to, but that's something to be thinking about too, is like, if you are going to be self-employed, yeah, we need to think about like, how are you saving for retirement? We don't want you working forever. And God knows Social Security probably will not exist at the time we retire. Okay, Carrie, you said you figured out how to convert. Why do these emojis keep getting in my way? How you typically do your budget to you need a budget. You've fallen off the horse in monthly planning for this year and you really want to get back to it. Awesome, cool. Well, I'm glad you're here. Okay. Any other reflections? Did anyone not create a budget? That's okay. Caroline, can you talk to us?
Yeah. I definitely, I think you mentioned before that trying to fill out a budget was difficult because everything's just always in fluctuation. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what I was finding too. Is like everything from what I was making month to month. Like some months I'm making like close to nothing, and other months I'm making like 3 months worth of salary.
Yep.
Um, and then some months, my expenses are really minimal, and then other months
Yep.
it's like the cat gets sick, the car breaks down. It's like
Yep.
like everything, and I
Yep.
didn't know how to balance that, and I've never been able to figure out how to plan for that.
Yep.
And this is probably part of the like I've never had a savings. I know part of it is
Yep.
like a mindset thing where I went to college, went in debt. I've always been in debt, so that's just kind of
Yeah.
like the norm, and I just haven't
Yeah.
figured out how to get out of it.
Yeah, yeah. So something you could consider for folks that do have a lot of variance, something you might consider is looking at, because I think, were you using like the free budget, like the free personal budget one?
Yes.
Okay, so what you could look at doing is, and I'm sorry, the jets are going overhead and it is insanely loud. I hope you cannot hear them. What you could consider doing is adding up your expenses over the past year, or even just this year, like up until this month, and then dividing it by 10. So like, for instance, with the cat, it's like, okay, over the course of like, maybe it's like over the course of 2023, how much did I spend on a cat? And then can I budget that out into monthly, like into a monthly savings allotment? Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
like if you spent $3,000 on the cat last year, let's divide that by 12. And that would be what's in, because I think the budget planner you're working on is a monthly one. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So we could do that. And then you could also like, we could average out your income. So you could take your income for the last 10 months, or if you want to look at just 2023, however you want to approach it, and then divide that by 12 on average, how much is coming in. We could look at it that way to at least give you, I find for most people, like most entrepreneurs, their income's going to vary a lot more than their expenses are. Your expenses, like most of your expenses are going to stay the same, right? Like you got to pay rent every month. You got to eat every month.
Except
We
for
do have,
misunderstanding taxes.
except for what?
Misunderstanding taxes. I did
Yes,
that last
yes.
year.
Yeah. So like we have some fluctuations, and like we can start to accommodate for those, but a lot of your expenses should be pretty consistent, hopefully, right? Unless you're like being housed and unhoused, and then that would definitely add some inconsistency. But how does that sound? Do you want to try and like take like an annual or a 10-month approach to the
Yeah.
budget to see if we could get some more tangible numbers?
Yeah, I'll go through and do that.
Okay, let's try that. I'll also say, like, none of this has to be perfect. Like it's pretty hard to capture every single dollar coming in and out. We just want to get as close to it as possible so that we can make informed decisions. I would hate for you to be like, well, my expenses are probably like, I don't know, maybe $5,000 a month, and really they're like 7. And I'm like, there's a pretty big discrepancy. We need to know where that 2,000 is, right? And so, but if you're like, I think my expenses are 5,000, and really they're like 5,200, I'm okay with that. Like it's okay if we're not totally capturing every piece. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions about the personal budget? Good. Yeah. Okay. If anything comes up, just let me know. We can keep coming back to that. Okay. So before we dive into the next part, I would like to invite us to collectively take a deep breath. I did not see all of you breathe. Let's try one more time. Okay. I really want to encourage you to do the little hand raise emoji on the screen. If at any point you're like, you lost me, stop, go back. Because there's no reason you cannot understand this. And there's no reason you should go through this next part feeling lost. Okay. All right, here we go. All right, so the first one is, and I think this is probably one of the most useful financial documents you could make. My headphones are dying. That's sad. If you are seeking out funding. So if you want, so I mentioned that there are 2 documents you're going to have to make if you want to get a loan or if you want to get a grant. For folks, if any of you end up applying for the VSAC grant and the taxes they ask you to report are a different picture than your current financials, they're going to ask you for a profit and loss statement. That's what they're going to ask for, probably. So what this is looking at is it's a summary at a moment in time of all the money coming in and all the money going out, right? So profit, all the money coming in, loss, all the money going out. So it's really just looking at how much money is coming in right now, how much money is going out. We're not looking at, so this is very much like an actual, right? It's not like a, this is how much money I'd like to come in, or this is how much money I think might come in this year, or these are some expenses I'm anticipating having, right? There's no future orientation to a profit and loss statement. This is a snapshot of a moment in time. Usually it's right now, right? Usually you're being asked, what is your current financials right this second? Is what the B. You guys hear me?
It got shut down.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Let me just bring myself a little closer too. Sorry, my headphones died. Okay, so I'm going to show you, we're going to have, we have a handy dandy little folder that's got some free tools in it. I'm going to put this in the chat. And what you're going to do is when you open that folder, you're going to find the document that says profit and loss statement. And let me know if you get stuck at all. I see some of you in here. So what a profit and loss, is anyone not in there? Anyone? Yes, you can absolutely save a copy to your files. Yep, all of this is for you. I essentially just like went online and spent an hour trying to find spreadsheets that were not wildly complicated. And so this is what we have. Oh, hold on, Carrie needs to be let back in. Okay, so essentially this is a pretty simple statement. It's like what we're looking at, you'll see, can everybody see me like jumping through the doc with my cursor? Yes, okay. So when you are asked for a profit and loss statement, it's going to be for a certain period of time, right? So they're going to say, show me your financials from Q4. And you're like, I don't know what that is. I'm going to Google Q4. Q4 is like the last 3 months of the year, right? So we're looking at October, November, December would be Q4. And so what you would do is you would go into your bank statements, you would go into your budget that we are going to create, and you would say, from the time of October 1 to December 31, this is how much money came in, right? This is how much I sold. If you had any other revenue, like if you had, this isn't going to be relevant to most of you, but like, let's say for instance, like you owned a piece of property and you rented it, or you had other assets that were generating revenue during that time, you could put those in there. But for most of you, it's just going to be how much did you sell during that time? What were your costs? So if you had cost of goods, if you're like a product maker, you would have your cost of goods here, right? That would be your gross profit, your cost of goods sold, sorry. That would be your gross profit. So this is all money coming in. And then you would lay out your expenses for that time period, right? So it's not just like indefinitely. So if, for instance, you pay for things on an annual membership, you would need to divide that by 12, multiply by 3, right? Like you would divide that by the 12 months of the year, and you would add up 3 of those months and you would put that in. If you were paying, this is where it gets a little funky. And like, you know, when you're asking for money or you're hoping to get a grant, you want to make your expenses look as huge as possible, right? Like you're trying to say like, well, it depends on what you're applying for. If you're applying for help that's like financially based, you're like, I have so many expenses and I make no money, right? Like that's the story, that's the narrative. But if you are trying to show someone that like you're worthy of a loan, then we're actually going to really want to try and inflate our sales, like not beyond what is true, but like you wouldn't want to like nitpick every single expense and pull them out. Does that make sense? It's kind of the same thing if you've ever like applied for a mortgage. You'll see people try to like, they'll always take into account like any bonuses they had. Like they're trying to make their income look as big as possible so that they can get as good of a mortgage as possible. It's the same thing with a loan. We're trying to make you look as solid as possible, as put together as possible, as, you know, asset full as possible so that they'll say yes. So you've got all your expenses here, and then essentially what it's going to say is a net income, right? And so net income just means your gross profit minus your expenses will be your net income. Any questions on that? Wendy looks like she has questions. Her brow is furrowed.
That's a constant sleeping. I just, in looking at the form, I don't know how to calculate depreciation.
I'm like, depreciation of what? Yeah, so there are all sorts of depreciation calculators. So like I just did a quick Google search. This is a great question. This is also like a fabulous reminder that like I am not formally trained in any of this and I learned it all by myself, which means you get to do this too. We can learn, we can do this. We don't need people to tell us how to do this all the time. So depreciation would be like if you had, it's like, let's say you make ice cream and you bought an ice cream machine for $15,000. Every year, the value of that machine is going to depreciate, right? It's not worth $15,000 forever. Every year it wears and tears more. It's like when you drive a car out of the lot, it depreciates by like an enormous amount, which seems unfair. So we're looking at that depreciation would be an expense, right? Like, so if you had an asset that was worth $15,000, but you're 3 years in, it's not worth $15,000 anymore. It's actually worth this, right? So you've lost that money. Does that make sense? I don't know if you have any physical things like that. Your laptop though, you can actually, I've asked, and you can actually, your laptop is an asset and it does depreciate. So you can put that in. Other questions on the profit and loss statement? Does anyone want to try and tell the group what a profit and loss statement is? Would anyone like to practice it? Yeah, go for it.
A snapshot of what is coming in and going out of your business in a fixed period of time.
Yeah, I love it. Hell yeah.
I have a question. What is, so like the cost of goods sold, like, is that if you're selling an item, then how much does that item cost to produce?
Yes.
So for you, like a service wouldn't have a cost.
You will not have a cost of goods. Nope. So if you, sometimes I work with product makers. And so like, let's say you make earrings, you have like the cost of the metal hook, you have the cost of the wooden medallion, you have the cost of the glue, the cost of the boxes, like all of that, right? Is anyone a product maker here? You are? Carolyn, what do you make?
Yeah, I make outdoor apparel.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Do you have a cost of goods sheet that you used already? A cost of goods calculator?
I have like kind of handwritten little notes that are very disorganized.
All right, well, let's get you a cost of good. I'll add one to the folder. So just if you don't see it in the next week, just remind me, but I'll add a cost of goods calculator in there because I have
Okay.
one. So we'll add that in there because it would be good for you to have like a true cost of goods. And if you need to have, I was just trying to think of like,
Do I include my labor in cost of goods, or is that?
that's a good question. Let me think. This was the other place that I always get tripped up on is cost of goods sold versus, let's do it. Cost of goods sold calculator. That seems like an oversimplification.
I was thinking about the labor piece too, because like as like when I sell therapy, the service, but maybe I do a bunch of other stuff in order to prepare for the session of therapy, does that labor be included in the cost of the good?
It does not include your labor. Cost of goods does not include labor. And Lori reminded me that I already have a cost of goods calculator in the folder. So if you pop back out to the folder and look at the specifically, Caroline, you can open up the COGS spreadsheet. And so here you can see, like, for instance, this is one for like a calendula infused almond oil. And so like products in the batch are 10. And so we're looking at like bulk cost of including shipping, purchase quantity, quantity in batch, portion in each product, product material cost. So the cost of goods for that product, this was where my question, I was like, I have a question. I'm not sure if I formulate. So the cost of goods for that product is $2.72 based on, you know, the oil, the calendula flour, the glass bottles, the label, the shipping, all that brings it to $2.72 per bottle. But if you have multiple goods, so like, do you have multiple lines of like multiple items of clothing?
Yeah, I do. And I think, like that part, I think I can break that down probably into different cost of goods.
Yeah,
Where
I
I
would break it
struggle-
down into different costs of goods.
where I struggle with like this kind of thing is that um like the cost of goods, it varies depending on the size. Like it costs me a lot more to make an XXL than it does to make an extra small. But I have to charge the same amount.
Yeah, so I would just average it probably to like, I would take like extra large all the way down to small, average those prices, and then do the equation that way.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, other questions? You guys are doing great. How is our blood pressure and our heart rates? Are we doing okay? Yes, good. No one has blacked out. No one has passed out. I'm happy. I love you guys. You're doing great. Okay, we're gonna move on. If you have any questions, come back to it. Okay, so how this difference is different than a balance sheet. So this is another document that if you are applying for any sort of funding, both a business loan, a grant, whatever, they will potentially ask for both of these. Actually, they'll definitely ask for both of these. Lies. You need both. How a balance sheet is different is a balance sheet is looking at exactly how much is your business worth. So if I were to go and try and sell your business tomorrow, how much could I sell it for? Right? And so what this takes into account that the P&L sheet, the profit and loss, is not going to take into account things like equipment, physical location, if you have any stocks. So these are things that like are what are called assets. So you'll see in this little image here, when we're talking about a balance sheet, we're talking about assets, liabilities, and equity. And so this is like, for most service providers, this is going to be an incredibly boring and empty document. You just like do not have these things. You don't really have assets. You don't have, unless you have like a physical location that you own, you're not going to have that. Many of us do not own stocks because we are not big conglomerate capitalists, unfortunately. And so like a lot of this is not gonna, it's not gonna be like super informative for you. But if you do have these things, this is very important, right? Because a bank is going to say, or a grantor is going to say, okay, like maybe you're not making a ton of money, but you have this whole assembly line of machines that you own, right? And that's like $100,000 worth of machinery. And so that is, I will back a loan because you've got that equity, right? You already have that. And so you qualify for a loan, even if you don't have a lot of money coming in. So when we go back to the folder, you'll see there's another one that says balance sheet. And really what, you know, if we think about the profit and loss statement is showing net income, that's what we're trying to see, is like how much money is left over after your expenses. Like, are you making money or are you not, is what a profit and loss statement is evaluating. Are you making money or are you losing money? One or the other. A balance sheet is really looking at how much are you worth? How much is the business worth as a whole? Does that make sense? The difference between those two things? Does someone else want to try explaining the difference between the two to the rest of the group? You can do it. I believe in you. You can even read it off the slide. One of you can do this. I believe in you.
Profit and loss is what's coming in, what's going out in a period of time. Balance sheet looks specifically at your assets. Like,
Amazing job. Round of applause for Lori. Great job. Great job. Go, Lori. We did it. Okay. So the balance sheet can get, you know, it's hard to find. For most of us, our balance sheet, like I said, is going to be very simple. But balance sheets can get incredibly complicated as businesses grow and like acquire assets and have physical locations and all sorts of equipment. You'll also see that like in the balance sheet, there's a line for like owner's equity. I wouldn't worry about these things right now. If you're like, I know I'm going to have to fill this form out, I really need help, let me know. There are people I can introduce you to that are very good at this and are formally trained in how to do this. And there's specifically in Vermont, there are 2 people you can speak to for free, which is great. The Vermont Community Loan Fund, Wendy, if you have not met Ben Green over there, you can tell him I sent you. He is excellent at this and it's free. You know, because the equity piece is like part of the, if you have invested money into the business. So let's say you like took $50,000 from your personal checking account and you invest it into the business checking account. Well, now the business is worth $50K, right? At a minimum, like you put that money in. So that is also considered equity. And there's, I think that the difference between assets and equity can get kind of confusing. And that's where like speaking with an actual financial advisor is very helpful if you need to dive into the deep end of this stuff. But just know for right now, balance sheet is really looking at what is the company worth. Profit and loss sheet is looking at, is the business making money or losing money? Which one, right? Or is it breaking even? That's what we're looking at really. Okay. Thumbs up, thumbs middle, thumbs down? Thumbs up? Okay. All right, let's dive into, in my opinion, the more interesting financial documents. I'm going to come back to the budgets one. Oh, did my sound get weird, Sandy? It might have been because the jets just went overhead. Am I okay now? These jets are just endlessly. I'm like, don't get me started on these jets. Diatribe. Okay, so what we'll cover, I'm just going to touch on this one. I'm just going to define it for us real quick. The other document that a bank or a, like if you have a financial investor, or if you really only like banks and financial investors are going to ask about cash flow projections. If you're applying for a grant, they're not usually asking about this. Grants are much more focused on like what is currently happening or what has happened to put you at a disadvantage is typically what they're looking at. They're not looking at like, what's your potential? But a bank or a financial investor or like a, you know, God forbid you choose an angel investor, we can discuss that. Those types of folks are really looking at what's the potential, right? How much could come in? And although this document is typically used more for that category, I actually think it's an incredibly informative piece of material for us as business owners too, right? Like we also should be thinking about what's coming. What are we trying to do here? Like, where do we want to go? You know, if I'm Lake and I'm like, oh shit, my expenses are twice what I thought they were. Okay, that means then like I have a tangible specific number that I need to be gunning towards in my financial projections, right? I know it's not $2,000 a month, it's $4, or like it's not 5, it's 10, right? I now know, I have an idea of what I at least need to be at a minimum reaching towards. And so cash flow projections are really like, it's an opportunity to sit down and just look at what kind of work do I have booked out? What kind of engagements or relationships or clients or customers have I said yes to verbally, but have not like fully brought in, right? Like I have not fully like converted that into a paying customer or client, but I got a yes, or I am planning on pitching to XYZ, or the other thing we can do here, and we'll explore this next week, is we can look at reasonable percentages of growth. So for, you know, and these are industry specific, but a business should be able to conservatively grow about in between 10 to 20% year over year. That is like a relatively safe average. It's not true for everyone. You're going to see some people that are like, I grew 500%. And you're like, great, I'm so happy for you. And then there are going to be people who like flatline year over year, right? Like, so there's a lot of variation here, but on average, like if you're like, I have no idea where to begin, I have no idea what to project, we can start with like, what would it look like to project a 10% growth year over year? And then we do that calculation and we look at those numbers and we say, yay or nay, that's going to work for me. That makes sense for my expenses. If you're like, I'm going to be living on the street if I go at 10% year over year, I have to be at 20%. Otherwise, this isn't going to work. That's another moment for us to check in and be like, is it possible for you to reach 20% growth year over year? Because if it's not, we need to come up with another solution, right? So we'll talk about this more next week. I'll give you some equations to play with and just see like, what would it look like at 10%? What would it look like at 15? What would it look like at 20? Based on my expenses, how much growth, how many years would it take me to get to a place that's sustainable? Like, is that in the next 3 years? Is that 5 years? Do I need that to be 1 year, right? We'll just kind of get a little bit more clear on that. Any questions on the cash flow projections for now? Does that make sense? Like what we want to be able to do? Has anybody done this before? Has anybody like played with cash flow projections? Wendy, you have? Awesome. Yeah. Most of us, especially I would say in my experience in the first 3 years of business, You are so deep in the shit of just trying to keep the lights on today that you have no time in your brain to try to project into the future. But it's honestly like one of the most useful things we can do, because without a clear image of where we're trying to go, we can get lost very quickly in the weeds of like, I'm gonna try this thing, I'm gonna try this thing, I'm gonna try this thing. And then, you know, like we're chasing the squirrel all over the place. So having an opportunity to sit down and be like, no, this is like a reasonable, you know, I did this with a client recently and we found she was consistently hitting 12% year over year. And I was like, this is awesome. This means we can pretty much plan and bank on 12% this next year. What does that mean? What do you want to do with that money? Right? Like, where does that money need to go? So it can give us some, you know, a little bit of a safety net to plan. Okay. Any questions? Good, good. All right. I know this is this is our last one, and then we'll dive into a little workshopping. Okay, so budgets are a little bit different. I would say, like, if they're closest to anything, budgets are closest to a P&L statement. They're going to be closest to looking at like how much is coming in and how much is going out. The difference here is like budgets. The way I like to do the budget is I'm looking at how much money is going to come in, how much money is going to go out, what are the things I want to save for? So like, do I need a new laptop in the next 2 years? Do I need to upgrade my van if I use my van for work? Do I want to invest in a business coach and I want to be able to pay for that, right? Like whatever it is that I want to save for and invest in, that's going to also add into our budget, whereas that's not going to be in a P&L statement, right? We don't have like a saving line item in our P&L. And so what we want to do is our budget is kind of future oriented. So we're projecting a little bit of like, you know, we have the reality of what we know is it's costing right now. And we have the reality of what we're getting paid. We're also thinking a little bit about the future of like where we want that to be going. But then what we're going to do is we're going to compare that month over month to the actual. So that means we have our idea. It's kind of like the scientific method, right? We create a hypothesis. We're like, I think this is what it costs to run business. And then at the end of that month, we check in and we're like, was I right or was I wrong? And I'm going to adjust those numbers to be accurate. Does that make sense? So right now, what we're going to do is we're going to collect the data up to January 1 of this year. And we're going to fill in that back data so that next week we can hopefully start to make some more informed decisions about where we're going this next year. Okay, so you're going to go back into your folder and I'm going to have you grab the annual business budget. Do not grab the one that says Emily Eley. Grab the one that says annual business budget. Does anyone not know how to make a copy of a document to make it yours so you can edit? Just do like a quick hand raise. Yeah, sure. Cool. My Lord, we have a lot of tabs open. Do not judge me. Okay. All right. So when you open, you click on that. You're going to be here. You're going to go to File. And you're going to go to Make a Copy. And if you want, usually what I recommend doing is go like parentheses, your name and the year, just so you have good Google Drive hygiene. And then you can choose where you want to put that. So if you want to put that somewhere else, that's totally up to you. And you'll click Make a Copy. And then you should be able to edit it. That work? Cool. All right, let's get this up. Okay, so there are absolutely paid software for what we're going to do today. That being said, I think you can get so much done with this free spreadsheet, and I think it's probably my favorite one so far. So we're going to start here. If you are already, is anyone already tracking their finances in something like QuickBooks or somewhere else? You are? Great. Okay, cool. So no need to recreate the wheel rows. If you want to just do this in QuickBooks, I'm absolutely okay with it. If for the sake of this exercise, you would like to use the spreadsheet, that's also fine too. Like whatever you want to do. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to give you, like, what else did we have to cover? Oh my Lord, I keep moving your faces where I need to look. That's it. Okay, this is all we're doing today. So I'm going to give you the next 15 minutes, okay, to input your income. Most of you are probably not going to have things like dividends, interest, refunds, all this stuff, so I would just ignore it. I am not adept enough at Google Sheets to know how to delete rows without breaking the function. We can absolutely ask my wonderful, delicious partner to come and give us a tutorial on that if we want. But for now, I would say, like, don't go and mass delete rows. It's just going to break the calculator. Just leave the stuff empty that is not relevant for you. And what your goal is right now is we're going to break out these income sources. Now, this is business income, right? So if you have like a part-time job or you're getting revenue somewhere else, that's going to show up in your personal budget. It's not going to show up here in the business budget right now. And that's okay. And for some of you, if you're like, I'm not even making any money yet, I understand this part might feel like a little bit. What you could do is like focus a little bit on October, November, December. If you think there's money coming in, you could also work on just creating your categories. I'm going to show you what this looks like. Let's see if we can zoom in. Because a lot of the time people are like, let me zoom. People are like, how nitty gritty should I get? And I say, get as nitty gritty as is useful to you. So for me, it's incredibly useful for me to see, like, technically this line, and this line are all the same work. I'm doing the same exact work. These are all one-on-one clients, but where the money for those one-on-one clients is coming from is different. That is, yeah.
I don't see it.
You're not seeing?
No.
Let me try again. Weird. Maybe it didn't like me switching to a new tab. You see now? Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, so what I was saying is, like, for instance, VSAC grants, pay out of pocket, made for more is my coaching program, pay out of pocket, made for more clients, and the SBTAE grant are all technically one-on-one work. It's the same exact work, but where that money is coming from is different. This is important for me to be able to see because I want to be able to look at the end of the year, how much money came from VSAC? How much money did people pay out of pocket? How much came from this grant that was like possibly a one-time experience? We don't know yet. We're hoping it comes back. Because then I know, like, for instance, right now, if I was to do financial projections for 2025, there's no universe where I'm banking on this 20K because I don't know that that's an option next year. But if that was packed in with my other one-on-one work, I wouldn't be able to see that, right? And so I wouldn't be making an informed decision. So I want you to separate this as much as you can to make informed decisions. If you have a lot of like revenue streams, if things are coming from different places, I want you to break that out. So what I'm going to do is let you loose. You're going to fill in January through as much of October as you know so far, and we'll go from there. Okay. If you do not, show of hands, how many people do not have income to report from this year? We've got Rose. Anyone else? Sandy? Okay. What I want you to focus on is you can actually kind of hop over. Hold on. Let me move our faces again. you can hop over to this next tab to expenses. This is going to be everybody else's homework. But for folks that don't have income right now, I want you to start working on organizing the expenses. Okay. And so you'll see there is an enormous amount of like options for expenses in here. You are not going to have all of them. I just want you to work on categorizing them in a way that makes sense for you. So like maybe you don't need an entire website category, but you do need something else. I don't know, whatever it is. For Caroline, for cost of goods, trying to remember how we did this. Let me pull up on my own, somebody else's that has cost of goods and see how they categorized it. And just maybe I can give you a quick suggestion on that. So eventually what we're going to get is we're going to get this summary and we'll see how much money is coming in. I haven't put my expenses in. So, and then we'll see how much money is going out. And what is helpful is as the years go on, we should be able to start to see trends. Now, this is a really fascinating thing. Like, so I freaked the fuck out in August, September this year. I was like, where is the money? Usually August, September are my highest grossing months out of the entire year. If we were to like look back at historical data, which I'll try to do my best to bring that. This is the first time that I've had a fully functioning business during an election year. The last election 4 years ago, my business was only 2 years old and I just didn't really have enough. I didn't have enough going on to like know what I was doing. This was the first time that I was like, what is happening? Where are the clients? Where's the money? And so like, that's good for me to know, right? As I plan out like the next 4 years, I know there might be some variance during those election years and that's okay. Money came in different places that would not normally this would be like this bar, June would be like at the very lowest. Usually June is the lowest amount I get paid. So any questions right now? How are we feeling? Rose is like, I don't know how I feel right now. Go ahead, Wendy.
My question is, I have grant money coming in, part of it, which is towards income, and part of it is operating costs or project development costs. In terms of this specific document, I'm only putting what can be applied to income into the income source page. And then am I itemizing those other costs? Like, where am I accounting for the other money that is coming in but is not going into my bank account?
Say your question again.
So I have grants coming in. A portion of that grant money will go towards salary, and then a portion of it will go towards running projects and the expenses associated with
That
running.
should show up in the expenses. So I would just put the entire income in, right? Like I would create a line for the grant. And
Okay.
whatever month it's coming in, I would put that amount. And then
Okay.
under the expenses, so we have a salaries expense line. So we
Okay.
could put like whatever, if you know exactly what you're going to pay yourself,
Okay.
we could put, I think you said you were going to average it out, right? Over multiple months. So we could
Okay.
start to put that in there.
So put the full grants or donations or philanthropy on the first page, and then the second page, break out those expenses and it'll
Yep.
pull it out.
Yep. Yep. Other questions? All right. I'm going to let you loose. If you get stuck along the way, just unmute yourself, ask away. I'll be right here. Sorry, Wendy, I just saw your question. Yeah, we're looking only at actuals right now. So what actually has transpired in reality. Wendy, can you ask your question out loud? Why can't I hear you? Weird. It says here. Can you guys hear Wendy? You can? So it's me. Hold on. Let me look at. You try now.
Can you hear
Still
me?
can't. Oh, now I hear you. That was
Okay.
weird.
My wires are being fiddly too, so my video's going out.
My speaker switched to, I think it switched to my second screen was what was happening.
I just lost, I'm losing my video. My question was, do in-kind donations have a role anywhere in this document? So I have in-kind volunteer hours, I have in-kind storage unit donations, I have
But
in-kind.
not in kind cash donations.
Correct. But if they weren't provided, that becomes an actual expense, either
Sure.
paid labor or facilities.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's legit. I think, can you put a dollar amount on those in kind donations?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
So that's going into
So that would go
income
into income.
or expenses. Income?
Well, yeah, because if it was an expense, then it would be deducting it.
Yep. But
But really, it's a gift.
it's not
Mm.
money coming in, but it's a benefit that I'm receiving that I also need to track for future grant stuff for
Mhm.
cost sharing.
That is a unique question.
Like to keep you
I
on my
would
toes.
say I want that captured. I don't know that it needs to be captured in this spreadsheet.
Okay, I have it captured in my own
Somewhere,
stuff,
yeah.
but I don't know if it,
I'm just trying to think of like,
is
anytime
that
you
more of
have
an
this,
asset?
anytime
later?
you have this kind of question of like, should this go in or not? Then the question I want to ask is, how does having it in or not having it in influence decisions next? And if it doesn't influence them,
Well, I guess the main thing is I need to, when I'm creating new budgets for projects, I need to reflect the actual cost that just happens to be
sure.
absorbed by someone else.
Well, okay, so let's do this.
And
This is what I would do. I would put the in-kind donation under income, and then I would put rent under expenses. So it's gonna be a wash,
okay,
but
but
then
it's
you have
showing
it.
up as both.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I would do.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Somehow lost all my screens though.
All right, I'm going to pull us back together so that we can just go over our homework. And if there's any questions coming up for you right now, this is really all your homework, is to finish this spreadsheet between now and next week. And if you haven't finished your personal budget, I would like you to finish that. So let me just go ahead and share my screen again and move our faces. Where were we? Here we are. Okay. All right. So, like I said, homework for this week is really just to make sure, like, if you haven't put that money date in weekly yet for yourself of when you're going to work on this homework, please, please, please put that in. Finish your personal budget if you haven't finished that, or if there's like still some fine tuning. And then really what I want you to focus on is finishing this business budget. I would like this to get like as close to as done as possible for next week. And then lastly, if you haven't signed up for next week, it's super helpful for me just in terms of grant reporting purposes that you are registered for these sessions. I know it's kind of annoying and you're like, what's the difference? I registered for the first one. But it is very helpful if you don't mind. So I'll throw this in the chat in terms of like me not getting in trouble. That is helpful to me. But I'd like to open up the floor and just see any questions you guys have. How did we do today? Any takeaways? Anything that came up for you? How was the last like 10 minutes exploring your business stuff?
I mean, I know for me this has been super helpful. I've known I've been super disorganized. I just kind of needed somebody to give me the sheets and say fill them out. So
Yeah. Good. I find for most folks, it's like you're perfectly capable of doing this. It's just someone carving out the time and holding you accountable to actually filling the stupid sheet in. I mean, it's like I literally teach this stuff and I'm like, I guess I could fill my own in while I'm doing this. It's hard. It's hard to make ourselves do these things. It's easier when there's a little accountability. Anyone feeling doom, gloom? This really sucked and I feel sad and now the rest of my day feels poopy. Or did me just owning that make your day feel better? Hopefully. You're like, oh, I'm not alone. Right.
it does kind of feel like a vicious cycle. It's like as I'm filling in these sheets, I'm like looking at that line that says interest. And I know I've been paying some interest to try to pay back taxes and things and stuff. And it's like, I don't know how to get past that part of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Past it in terms of like literally how to make enough money to get past it, or like past it in terms of like you've got some mental shit around owing interest.
Yeah, I mean, probably both. Like I don't want to keep raising my prices on my customers who are also having the same struggles.
Yeah, I know. It's true. And we can talk to you about, like, I didn't really dive into, like, we can look at this real quick. I know we only have a minute left, but like, I always like to be really transparent about just about everything. But when we look at, like, one of the things that I was curious to see when I was filling out this budget for myself, I filled this out yesterday, just this part. And this line item here, Opportunities Credit Union, that's like who's paying for this series. And like, I took a part-time job with them after my second kid, who is like almost 2 years old. And like, I told myself it was temporary. And I was like, I just need to like get myself through this really stressful period of like having a child and not having consistent income, and working for yourself is so fucking hard. And like, and it's 2 years later and I'm like, still have a part-time job, and like, doesn't mean I'm not a successful business owner, and so something that I was curious to look at is like, if I was to remove this, almost 29,000, like, would I be okay? Like, and the reality is like, we spend, I think we pay $3,200 a month in childcare right now. Like, it's not possible for me to make less money right this second. And so like, when we think about, I like to be really explicit with folks that expecting your business to pay for all of your expenses is a very tall order, like very tall. It is not realistic for many of us. And that's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean you failed. And to your point, like, Carolyn, yeah, sure, I could raise my prices. I could be more expensive, but I don't want to. Like, I don't want to make people like struggle to work with me. I want it to be as easy as possible. And so, it's a balancing act of like, I think the thing I want you to walk away with this month is to like have a really good understanding of how much money can your business possibly make and you still be sane. And is that enough? And if it's not, then like, where else can the money come from? Where else can we get the money, right? Do you need a part-time job? Do you need to develop another revenue stream in the business? Do you need to find some sort of like financial backing for the business? Like, how do we make those numbers work? But if we have no idea of what the numbers are, then like, we're just shooting in the dark, right? We just like, there's no way for us to make these informed decisions. So it's, I think it's, and also I hope sharing my own financials isn't upsetting to anyone. And if it is, I'm more than happy to navigate that and talk about it. And like, just to be clear, that like the first 3 years of my business, I made almost no money. And so, like, it takes time to make money. And like, the more we can decrease the expenses and the overhead, the better. But some of us like run, I have one woman who like, she grossed 80K. I think I told you this last time. She grossed 80K last year and she took home 11. Who the hell is living on $11,000? None of us. You're like, I am. And so, like, she just has crazy overhead, right? Like, her overhead's just nuts. And so like, that's where, we can get creative and we can think about like, can we come up with another part of the business that doesn't have such high overhead? Is there room to raise prices a little bit? Can we find you a part-time job doing something that isn't soul crushing? Can we, like, how else do we find you a wealthy partner and we marry you off? I don't know. We can think of things. We can come up with solutions. And yes, Wendy, totally. We, lots more families are qualifying for childcare now. We did submit ours. So hopefully and we got one more year and then we got one kid out and we'll drop down to like $1,800 for the childcare. Yay. I can't wait.
Put a flag for anybody else who has young kids, like, it's substantial increases. So you don't have to suffer as much if you still have young kids.
Well, okay, you guys have your marching orders, you've got your homework. I don't want to hold you too long. If you have any questions, just reach out. And did everyone get the replay from last week in your inbox? Yeah, did anyone not get it? And they were like, what replay? Okay, cool. Always check your spam and your promotions because it is coming from my email management system. It's sometimes it gets snagged and thrown over there. So you can always drag me over to your inbox. All right, my dears. Happy number crunching and spreadsheet filling. And we will see you next week. Okay. All right. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.